President Trump is renewing his criticism of the Smithsonian Institution, calling it out of control. And Walmart is recalling frozen raw shrimp sold in 13 states over concerns of potential radioactive contamination. Good morning, I'm Corva Coleman from NPR News, and here are today's top stories. Israel says it is calling up an additional 50,000 reservists for a major military operation against Hamas in Gaza City. The call-up letters are expected to be sent out soon, with the draft starting in the coming month. NPR's Jackie Northam reports from Tel Aviv.
The decision to call up additional reservists came after Israeli military leaders gave preliminary approval to the next phase of the war in Gaza. The increase will almost double the number of active reservists in the nearly two-year-old war. An Israeli military official, speaking on condition of anonymity, says many of the reservists will free up active duty troops currently deployed in other areas so they can fight in the densely populated Gaza City, in areas heavily controlled by Hamas. Israeli troops are already laying the groundwork for a broader upcoming operation. Jackie Northam, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
NATO defense leaders are scheduled to hold a virtual meeting today. They're expected to discuss what security guarantees could be offered to Ukraine to help end Russia's war there. Defense officials from the UK and other countries are also meeting at the Pentagon today to discuss the war. The Trump administration has deployed several U.S. naval warships to the southern Caribbean to combat drug operations. A U.S. source familiar with the deployment, who spoke on the condition of anonymity, said the naval vessels include thousands of U.S. sailors and Marines. Venezuela's president says he is preparing thousands of Venezuelan militia members in response. President Trump is renewing his criticism of the Smithsonian Institution. NPR's Neda Ulabi reports.
In his post, the president called the Smithsonian Institution out of control, all caps. He said museums throughout Washington and all over the country are essentially the last remaining segment of woke. Again, the last word, all caps. The White House earlier this month announced plans to audit 8 Smithsonian museums to ensure what it called alignment with the president's directive to celebrate American exceptionalism, remove divisive narratives, and, quote, restore confidence in our shared cultural institutions. But a number of museums and historical associations have pushed back against what the American Alliance of Museums described as, quote, the growing threats of censorship in a statement. Neda Ulabi, NPR News.
Walmart is recalling frozen raw shrimp sold in 13 states. That's because federal health officials are concerned about potential radioactive contamination. The health officials say they found a radioactive isotope in some shrimp imported from a single supplier in Indonesia. Those toxic shrimp never got to the U.S. market, but officials don't want anyone eating any shrimp from that supplier. Hurricane Erin is sweeping through the Atlantic Ocean between the East Coast and Bermuda. Top sustained winds are at 100 miles per hour. Erin is not expected to hit land, but it's kicking up rip currents from Florida to New England beaches. Officials are warning people to stay out of the ocean. Nebraska Governor Jim Pillen has announced plans to transition a state corrections facility into an immigration detention center. From Nebraska Public Media, Arthur Jones has more.
The facility, called the Nebraska Department of Correctional Services Work Ethic Camp, can currently house 200 people. Nebraska's Director of Correctional Services, Rob Jeffries, says NDCS will continue to handle local operations, but the work will be federally funded.
The partnership will be formalized with an interstate support agency with an initial 365-day commitment with re-up with a commitment of at least 3 years in negotiations.
There is currently no timeline for when it will begin to house individuals. For NPR News, I'm Arthur Jones in Lincoln, Nebraska.
The governors of 6 states are sending their own National Guard troops to Washington, D.C. They're to assist in President Trump's initiative to tackle crime. But as NPR's Meg Anderson reports, several of those states have crime problems of their own.
The governors in West Virginia, South Carolina, Mississippi, Louisiana, Ohio, and Tennessee have all pledged to send their own National Guard troops to D.C. for the Trump administration's crime campaign. But violent crime in the district is falling, and last year, cities in at least 4 of those states had higher murder rates than Washington's. In Mississippi, for instance, Jackson's murder rate was nearly 4 times the rate in D.C., and in Memphis, Tennessee, the murder rate was nearly triple. Insha Rahman of the Sierra Institute of Justice says that signals to her
this is about a political power grab and political theater, not about making cities safer.
NPR reached out to the governors in Mississippi and Tennessee, but did not receive a response. Meg Anderson, NPR News.
The Environmental Protection Agency is planning to reverse a landmark scientific finding. This has been the basis for federal climate regulations for more than a decade. This decision could potentially lead to more emissions. NPR's Michael Copley reports the move could also carry serious risks for corporate America.
The EPA said in 2009 that climate pollution threatens people's well-being, paving the way for the government to regulate greenhouse gas emissions. The EPA now says it doesn't have that authority. That could weaken a defense fossil fuel companies are using in state lawsuits, where they argue climate change is an issue for the federal government to deal with. Jeff Homestead is an environmental lawyer.
There's plenty of people out there who want to bring lawsuits, and it seems like this would just invite a lot more litigation.
Business groups say having national climate rules also creates a predictable environment to make investments. Public hearings on the EPA proposal are scheduled for this week. The agency says it hasn't taken final action. Michael Copley, NPR News.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington.